Well, hello! Today we'll be looking at what's in this unassuming pouch from Eachine, but just before we get into that, a quick reminder, please like or dislike this video if you didn't like it, comment down below, don't forget to subscribe, and if you can find that little bell icon somewhere, click on it, it may tell you when I'm uploading stuff. So, what have we got here? It is the US65 Pro from Eachine. I have to explain, it had the weirdest looking package. It was such a weird shape, and that's because when we got it, it had basically taped to it this plug like this. Literally like that, and I thought, well, what's in there that needs a mains plug? Because I knew the US65 was coming along, but I didn't really examine the details of it. I just assumed it was the updated version of like the UK, and I think there was another US65. Very good 1S indoor quads, but this is different. If we open up the pouch, you got all the stuff here. And the first exciting thing I noticed about this is I've got these two little antennas. You can get it plug and fly or the SPI receiver. This has come with an RXSR receiver, so I can be able to fly that a long way. And there's another weird thing here, because it's like, look, you've got two battery attachments in series, so this will actually support 2S on a tiny little 65mm quad like this. We'll get to that in a second. We'll show you what else is in here and the reason for that plug. So we've got in here this 12 volt 3A adapter, and that's got a US plug, so hence they gave me that because I'm in the UK to get to this. And the reason they do that is they've also included this. They've included these before, but they were pretty much satisfied with the fact that it's got a barrel connector or an XT60 connector, and figured most people would have those. And I've been using my old Taranis X9D charger to plug into that, and it's been fine. The other thing you notice is this battery connector is different. I'll have to show a close-up of exactly what these look like, but they are different. It actually says that the first 200 versions of these will be shipped with the GNB 27 2.0 plug, and then they will be replaced with the ET 2.0 plug. I'm not sure which this is. It's different than the normal PH2, and it's like they've gone the way that Beta FPV have, and they've made their own battery connector. Great for carrying more ampage, but it does mean that you're sort of stuck with the batteries you've got and you can't easily convert between them. We do get a total of 4 batteries in the box, so it's either 2 flights or 4 flights depending how you fly. We've got some little parts here, including this little, what looks like a piece of TPU that I think you'd use to add the second battery under the first one. Some instructions and a little OSD board for changing some of the camera settings. As far as the specs go on this one, 0802 14,000 kV motors, so not high kV, but of course you can run it as 2S. At 1S I'm expecting it to be quite a sort of nice little gentle Explorer quad for indoors, and 2S can go a little bit crazier. The VTX power is set to 25 milliwatts. I think the camera is the most exciting thing. It's the Caddx Ant, and people have been on at me to test the Ant for ages. In fact, I have one here to test, but depending which video comes out first, it'll be the case of I liked this or didn't like it, or look for this later. I don't know. Don't know which is going out first. Anyway, some exciting stuff to look at. I think it looks like the camera angle is alterable through that. I think we should get this bound up, get it onto Betafly, see what we need to do, and then float around, see what I can do with it. Okay, well, I've just bound the receiver, so let's take a look at what's in Betafly. And as per normal, the connector is on the bottom, so it's quite hard for it to look set up nicely there. Anyway, ports wise, what we got? Serial RX on one and TBS Smart Audio on another. All good so far. Config wise, we're running D-Shot 600. I'll be adding motor stop. Props out configuration. Do notice as well, this is Betaflight 357, quite an early version in comparison. I don't know if there's a reason for that. Some people seem to suggest that it's harder to tune after version 4 for these very small quads. Running 8K loop, CPU load is reasonably high on this F4 board, but not over the top. S-Bus setup, air mode permanently on, which I don't like. We're taking that off, but yep, looks good so far. Power and battery is about what I'd set it to, 2.9 on min, 4.5 on max, just to make sure those HV batteries have plenty of room for charging up and discharging down low. Pit tuning wise, looks fairly normal. Rate profile, ooh, some weird stuff in there. Super rates look normal, RC Expo looks normal, but they've upped the RC rate by 1.2 and 1.3, giving some odd figures in the max velocity. I think this is a good clue that perhaps the channel mapping set differently than what I want. Let's have a look there. in the receiver. Yep, it's set to TAER. I am AETR. So with the RXSR, there's no RSSI coming through on the channel, but we can push that back from our telemetry that's incoming back to a channel and put it on screen that way. If you don't know how to do that, here's a link on the screen to what you do. It's what I like to do rather than rely on the radio telling me, like, telemetry slow, that sort of thing. Modes, arm, angle and turtle mode, basically. Not much set up there. A few more little bits to do. Nothing in the motors. And OSD, not turn reusable. It looks like an NTSC camera and they've shoved everything down the bottom. I just like to spread this around a bit and have them sort of surrounding the top end as well. But not much to fix. I'll sort that out, change it to my liking, and then we can try and fly this thing. So I started out flying a couple of batteries on 1S. I figured this would be okay at 1S, maybe a sort of more of a cruisy thing. But if you look at the throttle percentage I'm using, we're way up in sort of the 3/4 of the throttle to get this thing airborne. So although it flies okay, just going along, that's okay. As soon as you do anything where you turn a corner and then you lose some height, you have to whack the throttle back up so much. It's crazy, and that's how I ended up in the wash basket. So just to quickly explain, flying on 1S isn't just a case of plugging in the battery, because it's in series, so it means you haven't got a completed circuit. What you need to do, and they don't have this in the box, is get something like this little jumper and shove that over two of the contacts like that, and then you plug in and it completes. I think the lack of that jumper sort of suggests that maybe it's not designed for use with 1S, because it just does lack the power. I mean, it works fine. It's just it's not nice to fly because the way you have to keep stabbing that throttle so much. I feel it's necessary to explain as well that the bad reception we're getting here is interference, not a case of like the VTX being rubbish. People comment all the time about why is it looking so bad. It's essentially the amount of 5.8 Wi-Fi that's currently in my house. It makes everything look awful, and we'll find out what happens when we get out into the open about how it looks. You'll notice here I've got some little gates to go through. This is big thanks to Catch-22 Mania, or William here, who donated a bunch of cool stuff for me and gives me the ability to crash into more things. I did do 2 batteries on 1S, mainly because I needed 2 batteries at a time to fly on 2S, and it was no good just having one spare. So I got kind of used to it by the second one, but it's still not a very enjoyable experience. It's a shame really, because it's quite nippy and it just flies around nicely, but the way you have to give it that much throttle suggests that really you don't want to fly it on 1S. It's much better to have it on 2S and just use a throttle limiter. So let's bring this guy in and sort this out on 2S. I was getting a bit of a difference here. 3 minutes on the first battery, just about 2.5 on the second, but I was ready to go to 2S. So this is the way I think they want you to configure the batteries, but it is a bit of a squash and quite a lot of hassle to get sorted out. Essentially, you have that little piece of TPU that the first battery threads through and has to dig down into that battery mount. And you can kind of see it's a bit big and it's causing that plastic to distort a bit. And then you've got to try and squish the other battery in there, and it is tight as well, the tightest thing you can possibly think of. And it's real hassle to get these in because these stickers tend to get stuck and peel. So the alternative method that I might recommend to you, if this is a lot of hassle, is using a couple of small rubber bands. And see, what I do is I just shove the first battery in and the rubber bands around each end, and then I add the second battery inside those rubber bands to hold it that way. So we end up with that idea, and that's pretty secure. That's not really going anywhere. Again, it's not perfect. It's a little bit fiddly. These rubber bands are little, and having to thread this through is a bit of a pain. I don't know why with these sort of things they don't just say, actually, let's just put in a 2S with an XT30 connector instead of these weird thingy connectors, because really you don't really want to fly on 1S because it's underpowered, and you can always use a throttle limiter on 2S. So just a bit of an odd decision. Maybe they just had the shape and said, oh, we could power this with 2S, let's see what happens, but they didn't bother doing anything else. So here we are on 2S indoors, and yeah, it's certainly different. It still feels though a bit heavier than a regular 65mm quad, and I'm noticing that the hover point seems to be about 50% throttle a lot of the time. As soon as there's any sort of weight behind it, it's at least sort of 40–50%, and there's plenty of opportunity to crash into stuff because it's certainly quicker and more powerful, but still I think a little bit heavy because it's got those 2 batteries instead of 1 on a very small frame there. But I took this out and tried some light acrobatics in horizon mode, and it felt pretty easy, pretty nice to fly. I sort of thought actually what I want here is a little bit more room so I can fly and really let go of this. So I think, although you need a fair bit of throttle still, I think for inside flying I'd probably put a throttle limit on it if I was going to fly 2S, and I think 2S is the way to go. Perhaps just knock it down to sort of 80% instead of 100%. That would make it a little bit more docile inside if you're in sort of tight spaces. Obviously if you're in a sort of indoor racing situation, you'd want to zap it around as much as you could with as much power as you've got. I just wanted to see exactly how bad my video picture would get if I took it down along some brick wall here, and it's pretty bad. It never used to be this bad. It's really changed since everyone's at home and everyone's using 5.8 Wi-Fi. Really quite nasty now. Although it looks like I'm coming into land at 2 minutes, I actually had to reset this quad halfway through the flight. So the flight time I got out of 2S was about 3 minutes, just inside the house rocking around like I was. After the inside flying, I decided what it needed to do was get outside properly and see what we could do. So I went to my little tree spot and started flying a little bit of tree proximity, because it gives you a nice sense of speed, even if you're in a little quad which doesn't really have any speed to speak of. But just flying low through the trees gives you a decent sense that something's going on. And yeah, it was really fun to fly. Normally with these little whoops I'd be worried about losing signal all the time, because of course they're normally on an SPI receiver. It's so cool to have a proper receiver in this, so you can just fly it as far as you like. And bouncing into stuff, again, it's so light that you've got so much time to rescue yourself. It's great fun. So yeah, I had good old fun here. It's one good thing about it as well, it's very inconspicuous. I travelled light with the dog here, just out for a walk and to do a couple of batteries, and the whole thing's very quiet. We didn't have to take much. It's very inconspicuous. That's the sort of flying we like. One word of warning, of course, though, is if you do go down, it's very quiet. You can use the D-Shot beeper, but that's super quiet. So what you'll mainly be aiming to do is not lose the battery, so you can use other methods to find it again. And we use the second half of that battery just to a little bit of, not really a range test, but just see how far I felt comfortable going. And I'm checking out the camera, of course, here. The ANTS is performing very well. We're getting a much better signal on the VTX. Now, I've set it to number 2 in terms of power, but I think this is actually set to 25 milliwatts, so we're on a 25 milliwatt signal all the time. And it's holding up pretty good, actually. I mean, obviously I've got reasonable line of sight here, but it feels like I'm sort of thick into the forest, so it's quite cool just to race along and feel you're all on your own. But as I said, if you are thick in the forest and you go down, make sure you've got some other way of letting you find that quad, because it will be a right pain to find if the battery comes out and you've got nothing else going on. But yeah, good fun involved here. We got about, I mean, the timer here again is saying 3 minutes. Flying hard on 2S around the field and using the throttle decently is actually about 2.5 minutes, but we had a bit of time where we weren't flying on this one. Yeah, but thoroughly enjoyable. I actually prefer it just flying outside like this than inside, but that's just me. When it comes to rain and stuff, I feel we don't have that much choice. Well, I certainly had a lot of fun with this one. There's a lot of nice features, particularly like the new ANT camera in there. That seems very good. I love the fact that this had an XM Plus with it, although that's not default. It can come with SPI or the RXSR or the Crossfire, in fact. I didn't particularly like these battery connectors. I'm still not sure which ones these are, but I don't understand why. It really does restrict you, because a lot of people are going to have a lot of different types of those PH2 connectors which you then can't use. It strikes me that if you're going to fly this on 2S, and really it didn't really work on 1S, then just have an XT30 connector and a bigger battery. Obviously, I'm guessing they had this mould because it looks exactly the same mould as the UZ65. It's identical, it's just got a flag on it. And they just sort of said, oh, let's have lower kV motors and we'll just put it in series. So it's sort of maybe not thought out completely there. As far as flying this, it's the same old story where if you go to S, it kind of stops it being as good as an indoor quad as it could be, but it makes a slightly better outdoor quad. So the UZ65 is currently my favourite indoor quad. I think it's amazing fun. 1900 kV 1S motors, perfect for in the house. This thing, I mean, you'd have to fly it 2S with a throttle limiter, but it makes the handling a bit different. It's a little bit heavier. That's not to say you can't do a lot with it. Take this outside though, and I thought it really excelled. I had much more fun with this, flying it through the trees and just taking it in sort of areas where I wouldn't take a larger quad. So I don't know if that's the intention, but I certainly had more fun with it there. I don't think I've seen a 65mm quad with 2S before. Normally they go up to 75mm, so you get a bit more power there because you've got larger props. Things like the Modular 75 are particularly nice outside like that. So this did a pretty good all-round job. I just generally think that the 1S indoor quad rules a lot better than this, but this is great fun for taking it in places you can't take a larger quad and flying around close proximity. I had a good fun with that. Anyway, this has been the US65 Pro from Eachine and was kindly provided by Banggood for review, so many thanks to them. This is available as the DE65 as well, which is essentially the German flag sort of wrapped around it. And as I said, aside from this RXSR, you can get it in Crossfire and you can get FlySky or FreeSky SPI receiver types. Anyway, I hope that review's been helpful and I'll catch you next one. Bye for now. Well, you've made it to the end of the video, so thanks once again for watching. If you like what you saw, then please consider subscribing, and if you really like what you saw, then be sure to check out the link to my blog for a variety of ways in which you can help support this channel.